Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching the China Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. US President Donald Trump touches down in Malaysia, kicking off a week-long tour of Asia that includes summits and high-stakes meetings. He will visit Japan to meet its new conservative leader, then travel to South Korea for the APEC summit, where his most anticipated meeting with China's Xi Jinping will take place on the sidelines in South Korea. Thailand and Cambodia are set to sign a peace deal in Kuala Lumpur in the presence of US President Donald Trump, formally ending their long-standing border conflict. The agreement follows a July ceasefire that halted 5 days of deadly clashes, which left more than 24 dead. China's top trade negotiator Li Chenggang and Vice Premier Li Haifeng hold a second day of talks with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in Kuala Lumpur. President Trump says he's confident of striking a comprehensive deal with China's Xi Jinping to end the long-running trade war. Asia's youngest nation, East Timor, officially becomes the 11th member of ASEAN after a 14-year wait, marking what its Prime Minister calls a dream realised. The former Portuguese colony of 1.4 million people hopes membership will boost trade and investment as it integrates into the region's $3.8 trillion economy. North Korea's Foreign Minister Choi Son-hui will visit Russia and Belarus at the invitation of their foreign ministries, state media KCNA reports. The trip signals Pyongyang's deepening ties with Moscow and Minsk ahead of its growing isolation from the West. Japan's new Conservative Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, tells President Donald Trump that strengthening the Japan-US alliance is her government's top priority. Speaking from Malaysia ahead of their upcoming summit in Tokyo, Takaichi calls Japan an indispensable partner in America's strategy towards China and the Indo-Pacific. US President Donald Trump says he will increase tariffs on Canada by an additional 10%, announcing the move on Truth Social after blasting an Ontario ad aired during the World Series. He ends trade talks with Ottawa as the ad quotes Ronald Reagan, warning that tariffs trigger trade wars and economic damage. Israeli forces carry out a targeted strike in central Gaza against a man it says was planning an attack on troops. The military claims the target was a member of Islamic Jihad, as both sides accuse each other of violating the US-backed ceasefire still in effect. Now, the world leaders are flocking into the Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur for a 3-day summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, otherwise known as ASEAN, and multiple meetings on the sidelines. The 47th ASEAN Summit is now underway from the October the 26th to October the 28th. The theme of this year's summit is inclusivity and sustainability and is focusing on strengthening regional cooperation, economic integration and resilience in the face of global challenges. The ASEAN Summit is accompanied annually by the East Asia Summit, a gathering of leaders from ASEAN nations, the United States, China, India, Russia, Japan, South Korea, Australia and New Zealand. This year, US President Donald Trump, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, newly appointed Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, Chinese Premier Li Qiang, and New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon are attending the summit. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak is representing Moscow, while Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is participating virtually. Beyond the leaders of ASEAN and the East Asia Summit nations, Brazilian President Luiz Lula da Silva, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will be in Kuala Lumpur too. President Trump, upon his arrival at the airport, was welcomed by the Malaysian leader. The US president appeared pleased by the warm reception and greeted the indigenous performers who welcomed the leaders. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim welcomed the leaders upon their arrival at the summit venue. Okay, we have further news coming out of Kuala Lumpur. The 47th summit is significant as Timor-Leste has joined the grouping as the 11th member of ASEAN. It is a historic day for East Timor as the country has long sought ASEAN membership upon gaining independence from Indonesia in 2002. It has first submitted an official application for joining the group in 2011. East Timor hopes to benefit economically by diversifying its resource-dependent economy, to increasing trade and foreign investment and expanding its regional influence. During the historic induction ceremony, Timor-Leste's President Jose Ramosa Horta and Prime Minister Yaksana Gusmao was present. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim welcomed the country into their group. Let's in fact listen in to what Ibrahim had to say.
To President Ramos Horta, Prime Minister Zadana Gusmao, its place here completes the ASEAN family, reaffirming our shared destiny and deep sense of regional kinship. Within this community, Timor-Leste's development and its strategic autonomy will find firm and lasting support.
However, one of the key members of the group, Myanmar, was not present at the summit and will not attend. Myanmar's acting president, Senior General Mi Aung Hlaing, will not be part of the summit, and the chair of the presidency of the grouping that was supposed to be passed on to Myanmar will now be given to the Philippines to hold the chair next year. This comes as Myanmar continues to remain gripped under civil war. This is what the Malaysian Prime Minister had to say on the situation in Myanmar.
But lasting peace cannot be imposed. It must be Myanmar-owned and Myanmar-led. Only then will the reconciliation endure. The relative peace and prosperity that ASEAN has enjoyed for nearly 6 decades are not self-sustaining. They must be renewed through cooperation and strengthened by shared purpose.
This summit would also witness a peace agreement between Thailand and Cambodia that will be overseen by the United States. President Trump would be present at the signing of the peace agreement. Earlier in the month of July, there were skirmishes at the Thai and Cambodian border that killed over 24 people. This is what the Malaysian Prime Minister said on this.
Later this morning, when Cambodia and Thailand signed their peace agreement here in Kuala Lumpur, the world will see that conviction can achieve. It reminds us that reconciliation is not a concession, but an act of courage, and that peace, once chosen, can reshape the future of nations. Thank you, Prime Minister Thailand and Prime Minister Cambodia.
Okay, we're now joined by Ross Feingold. He is a political analyst and he joins us live from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, good to have you with us. Ross, ASEAN kicks off today in Kuala Lumpur. Some big players there, of course, US President Donald Trump, along with representatives from China and, of course, Mark Carney, among other Southeast Asian nations and others from across the globe. ASEAN, however, as a bloc, how relevant is it today as a regional bloc in this era of 2025 of great power competition?
I think it's still highly relevant. Although it's not a free trade agreement, the ASEAN countries are members of trade agreements such as the RCEP, which brings together ASEAN countries as well as other Asian countries. But they do set policy direction and try to work together on a large number of issues. Many are trade related. I would describe those as business facilitation issues, improving the general business environment, the flow of goods and people within the region. They're doing a lot of things related to energy. And they look at other issues, not always with success. Examples would include the disputes in the South China Sea, as well as the ongoing civil war in Myanmar. But it does represent a joint voice. The criticisms of ASEAN are well known. Often it's criticized for doing more talk than action, and its policy of non-interference in the internal affairs of its member countries is often criticized. But it's relevant. It provides a joint voice for what was 10, and now with East Timor joining, 11 countries.
Yes, and what kind of outcomes can we expect from this? Obviously, it has attracted leaders, not just from the Eastern world, but also the Western world. We've seen President Donald Trump there, who has made previous attendances in the past, along with the likes of Canada as well. What more can we expect to see from these 3 days?
The reality for President Trump, and this is not a criticism, it's well known, he prefers one-on-one interaction with the leaders of other countries. He's not a fan of multilateralism or multilateral organizations. So at the very least, his presence at the meeting does give him a chance to meet with the leaders of the ASEAN countries. Obviously, he won't spend one-on-one time with all of them. He will with some of them, but he'll meet them in the group setting as well. And that's good for those countries. It gets them the attention of President Trump, no matter how brief that might be, but certainly there will be follow-up. The U.S. is looking to conclude trade agreements with some of the ASEAN countries, and those countries have growing trade relations with the U.S. in both directions, whether that's their exports to the U.S. or their imports from the U.S. So it's certainly productive and important for President Trump to be at this meeting, and that's for the benefit of those countries, the ASEAN countries, and the same with the other leaders who are attending as well. It gives those ASEAN leaders a chance to interact with those leaders and advance their agenda, whether they do that on a bilateral or multilateral basis.
And finally, Ross, what is the strategic significance of East Timor becoming ASEAN's newest member, the first since the 1990s?
East Timor struggles with development issues. Poverty is widespread. There's not much foreign investment. Their natural resources extraction, jointly with Australia, is reaching its upper limits, and the government's going to need new income sources. So, being part of various ASEAN initiatives, whether that's human resources development, energy policy, or business facilitation, it can only help ASEAN to be part of. Only help East Timor to be part of the ASEAN bloc. There's just total upside. There's no downside for East Timor.
Ross Feingold, it's a pleasure to talk to you as always. Thank you very much for joining us. We stay in the Indo-Pacific for our next story, where North Korea and China marked a significant anniversary commemorating the 75th year since the Chinese People's Volunteers entered the Korean War. On Saturday, officials from both nations gathered at Pyongyang's Friendship Tower to honor the occasion. Among those present were Kim Song-nam, a senior official of North Korea's Workers' Party, and Wang Ya-jun, China's ambassador to North Korea. In the ceremony, representatives laid flower baskets at the monument, while honor guards saluted and both nations' anthems were played. Earlier, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un also visited a cemetery in South Pyongyang province, paying respects to Chinese soldiers who died during the conflict, including Mao Aoyang, the son of China's founding leader Mao Zedong, who died during the war also. October the 25th holds historical significance, marking the day Chinese forces first entered North Korea to engage in battle during the Korean War. We move back over to Malaysia, and China's top trade negotiator, Li Qinggang, and Chinese Vice Premier Li Lifang have arrived at a venue in Kuala Lumpur for a second day of trade talks between the United States and China. The Chinese officials are meeting with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and US Trade Representative Jameson Greer on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit to de-escalate trade tensions between the two nations. A US Treasury spokesperson has told reporters that the first day of talks was very constructive. A positive outcome for the talks would remove roadblocks for the meeting between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea next week. The White House has officially announced the meeting, but Beijing has yet to confirm that the two leaders will meet. China and the United States are looking to avert an escalation of their trade war after US President Donald Trump threatened new 100% tariffs on Chinese goods starting on November the 1st. In retaliation for China's vastly expanded export controls on rare earth magnets and minerals. Okay, of course, this is the second day of those trade talks in Malaysia. China's top negotiator, Li Qinggang, has officially arrived in the Malaysian capital of Kuala Lumpur. This follows Li Lifang arriving yesterday, greeting Treasury Secretary of the United States, Scott Bessent, and US Trade Representative Jameson Greer, which of course is on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in an attempt to, of course, de-escalate this trade war, which has been occurring over the months between the two world's largest economies. A US Treasury spokesperson has told reporters on the first day of the talks that the first day was, quote, very constructive. One can only assume that the arrival of Li Qinggang means that these talks are in fact moving forward. A positive outcome for the talks would remove roadblocks for this much anticipated meeting between US and Chinese counterparts, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. They're meeting next week in South Korea on the sidelines of the APEC summit. The White House has officially announced that meeting. Beijing, however, has not. But we expect that announcement to come very soon, especially if these trade talks in Kuala Lumpur go very well. They're, of course, looking to avert this escalation, which has been going on ever since Donald Trump has announced his aggressive tariff policy back in April. Okay, we move on. US President Donald Trump is in the Malaysian capital and is set to witness the signing of the Kuala Lumpur Accord between Thailand and Cambodia. The peace deal brokered primarily by Malaysia, China and the United States, and it seeks to settle a border dispute that goes back almost a century, with the latest outbreak of violence between Thailand and Cambodia over the disputed land claiming at least 43 lives and displacing over 300,000 civilians over 5 days of intense clashes in July this year. The details of the deal were broadly agreed following a meeting between the premiers of the countries facilitated by Malaysia in Putrajaya. Okay, this is a significant day in Southeast Asia. A signing of a peace deal, one of the conflicts which Donald Trump claims as one of the 8 that he has solved during his first months of his second time as president. He has arrived in Kuala Lumpur for this peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia, who have had a long-term dispute. There will no doubt be a huge photo opportunity with the US president stood in the middle of the two parties like there has been previously. Of course, there was talks of trade pressure from Trump, which led to this ceasefire in late July, ending these 5 days of clashes, which led to the deaths of around 24 people. Of course, Trump is currently speaking ahead of this peace deal. And has very much hailed the process. China and the United States have also helped facilitate this peace deal along with Malaysia. No one has seen a copy of the actual agreement yet, but some information has been outlined by officials. They have to withdraw heavy weapons from the disputed border areas, conduct a joint survey of their border, with Thailand planning to build a fence in the non-disputed areas. They have to conduct joint demining operations. They have to jointly tackle the problem of scam syndicates, another operation which China is also involved in. And Cambodia has also said that the agreement will pave the way for the release of 18 Cambodian soldiers detained by Thailand. There will be more details revealed about this peace deal at the ceremony soon. And we will, of course, here on NewsX World, keep you posted on that. Okay, we are joined by Ross Feingold once again to discuss this further. Ross, Donald Trump hails at this peace deal as one of his 8, one of these 8 of these unendable wars which he has solved. Does this event give him credibility for that?
Certainly the United States and President Trump played a role. Obviously, the outgoing chairman, this year's chairman of ASEAN, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim of Malaysia, also played a significant role as well. But frankly, in the face of U.S. pressure to allow the United States and President Trump to earn most of the credit for today's agreement, it's no surprise that Malaysia and ASEAN are deferring to President Trump, and President Trump will add this to his list of peace agreements.
Of course, and we're also following news of those trade talks kicking off, those second day of trade talks kicking off in Kuala Lumpur between US and Chinese officials. Given the fact that China's top trade negotiator, Li Chenggang, has now arrived in Kuala Lumpur, what does that say about how things are going, Ross?
There's reason to be optimistic. As long as they're talking and until talks break down, then there's reason to think that they could reach a deal. And the comments from the U.S. Trade Representative, Jameson Greer, in recent hours are also positive, indicating that he thinks there is a deal that could be reached, that the two leaders can actually discuss or even sign or confirm when they meet face-to-face at the upcoming APEC summit. So the fact that they're talking indicates that there is still the possibility of an agreement.
Yes, Ross Feingold, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on over. And Chinese Premier Li Qiang has arrived in Singapore for an official visit at the invitation of Singaporean Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. Li was greeted by Singaporean Minister for Digital Development and Information, Josephine Teo, and Chinese Ambassador to Singapore, Xiao Zhongming, at the airport. Li has affirmed upon his arrival that over the 35 years since the establishment of China-Singapore diplomatic relationship, the relations between the two countries have maintained a good momentum. He has added that under the leadership of President Xi Jinping and Singaporean leaders, relations have advanced further in recent years. Li has also stated that China is willing to work together with Singapore to contribute more to upholding true multilateralism and promoting common development in the region. We're now joined by Collins Chong-Yu Keat. He's a foreign affairs and security and strategy analyst, and he joins us live from University Malaya, and in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here on the program. What more can you tell us about the relationship between Singapore and China, and what more will these talks bring us about their relationship going forward?
Yeah, we have seen how Singapore has also similar approaches and models of ASEAN as a whole with regards to relations between this, between both powers, with Washington and Beijing. Malaysia takes a similar approach of, neutrality, one of strategic hedging, balancing, and not being seen as overly pivoting to one side or the other. So Singapore has been meticulous in this regard, having these, deep economic ties with both Beijing and Washington. But on security and defense capacities, Singapore is heavily reliant on Washington in terms of bolstering its, deterrent capacity against any potential risks in the region, particularly from Beijing. So these talks have been one of the aims by Singapore to showcase messages of goodwill in line with the spirit of ASEAN as a whole, and to play as the role of the power balancer and power connector between both rivals, and how Singapore has been wanting to showcase this, growing clout and might in terms of regional diplomacy and dialogue, and that, of course, also being careful not to send a wrong message to the current administration in Washington, to Trump, that is now being pivoting more deeply with Beijing's economic influence, especially in regards to any potential efforts to bypass any tariff measures by Washington, and using this region of Singapore as one of the fallback options. So I think this is one of the parallel efforts being taken by Singapore, and but the core peripheral focus has always been in Kuala Lumpur now for the summit, and how these talks between the delegations from both Washington and Beijing will take shape in the next couple of days now.
Yes, and how does Singapore align itself when it comes to China and the possible security threats that it shows in the Indo-Pacific?
Yes, we have seen now Singapore is part of the, so of course, they have not a direct kind of defense overtures to one side or the other, although having quite a deep layered structural defense partnership with the US. And of course, Singapore is also part of the Five Powers Defense Arrangement together with Malaysia. It's not yet part of the Quad or any sort of, defensive alliances or mechanisms that can be seen as, taking sides against Beijing. Of course, it's now in a new realm of having to navigate in the post-tariff world and post-pandemic world. And we can see now from the statements by Prime Minister Lawrence Wong that we have to prepare. Singapore needs to prepare for a whole new realm of new geopolitical shifts in the region, and that it needs to strengthen and bolster its own capacities to navigate these complexities. But again, it will stand strong to its own proven conventional model of strategic hedging within these two powers, and of course having little to none deterrence capacity on its own without the support of regional powers. It will still need the defensive overtures and umbrella of Washington, and while at the same time having also to foresee the potential implications of the tariff measures and what has been the perceived decline of the American economic might. So, and of course also the fallback options will now have to be divided among whether it's from China or it's from other BRICS members, or whether to have a deeper alignment with other global south capacities. So this has been one of the dilemmas facing Singapore, although I foresee that in terms of at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, Singapore will need to also bolster its own national interest and sovereignty, and that will only be strengthened by the prevailing needs of this defensive or this security umbrella by Washington.
Collins Chong Yu Keats, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to get your insight on that. Well, that is all that we have time for here on the China Report. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates. Thank you.